The first story is Maria. A story published by an American woman on a website claiming that it is true. The least that can be said about this story is that it is strange. The woman who lives with her husband in one of the suburbs of the major cities went through a shocking and unbelievable situation, and this is the story she told, adapted by me. My husband and I live in a somewhat isolated place on the outskirts of our city. Although we are 50 years old, we are among the youngest residents of the neighborhood and 30 or 40 years younger than any of our neighbors. Most of them have grandchildren who visit them regularly and take care of them, but not for men. Who I always called Professor. The professor is a widower. His wife, Elena, died 12 years ago, leaving him to live alone, as they had no children. I only knew Elena briefly, but what I know is that she and the professor formed a couple who loved life in the fullest sense of the word. They were cultured and knowledgeable. They were good at life and kept the flame of love alive between them. I simply loved spending time with them, but Elena's death was very difficult for her husband. A year ago, the professor began fighting cancer, and due to the weakness of public services in the rural place in which we live, I was the one who took him to the doctors. Sometimes the professor would call me at inappropriate times and signs of panic appeared in his voice, so he was only able to say my name. With bouts of gasping and sniffling, even though the professor has his own accent to pronounce my name. I was not stingy in helping him in every way, including taking him to the city hospital, but he was very stubborn about staying at home. Perhaps he was aware that the end was near, so he preferred to stay in bed. In early October, at 4 in the morning, I was awakened from sleep by the ringing of my cell phone that revealed the professor's number. As soon as I answered, I heard a strange voice pronouncing my name in the same way the professor used to pronounce it. I answered. Yes. Professor. No. The voice answered me, laughing, "This is Maria, I will take him tonight." Then I woke up. I looked around, I was in bed. Phone in hand, my husband and dog were sleeping peacefully. So the phone didn't ring. Did it ring? After a short thought, I picked up the phone to call the professor, but I held back. What if he was asleep? He should be comfortable and not be disturbed. I got out of bed and dressed quietly, then went out into the backyard with my dog so that I could see the professor's house from there. I looked closely but did not find anything. The lights were off and there was no evidence of any movement. Quite simply, the house was completely quiet. Despite this, I did not feel comfortable, so I picked up the phone and called the professor. 25 rings and no answer. I went back to my room and woke up my husband, who got up and accompanied me to the professor's house. We knocked on the door, but we did not receive any response. We called the police, who came and stormed the place to find the professor quietly and peacefully in his bed. Due to the isolation of our residential location, the neighbors took care of doing many of the procedures themselves. Among these procedures is searching the professor's personal papers in order to obtain any evidence that leads them to his relatives, and of course this is one of the requirements for completing the burial process. During the research, I was looking at the documents on the professor's desk, and I did not find information related to his relatives that I knew or that he had told me about previously, but I found a group of pictures of the professor and his wife, Elena, as well as their daughter, whom they had never talked about. Maria, who died in Oaxaca in 1971. The second story, What is in the Basement? A scary story narrated by a young man, saying that it happened to his brother in their old family home, which was built back in the early 90s. One night, his brother, who had recently joined a band, met at home with his friends in the band before they went for group practice. They were all outside the house, but some equipment had to be brought from the basement of the house, so the brother who owned the house headed toward the basement while his friends sat waiting for him in the truck. When he arrived, he opened the basement door to find it dirty and full of dust. He went down the stairs, then took the equipment and was about to go up. But as he was taking his steps up, he remembered that he had forgotten the bag of pies there, so he went back to take the bag. He bent down and picked it up, and as soon as he raised his head, he saw something terrifying lurking in the corner. The interviewer looked at him, a mysterious, shadow-like shape with hidden eyes, which was directly facing him. The young man felt frightened and uncomfortable and stood there for a few moments. His family had always taught him to recite some prayers or say some sacred phrases when he faced creatures like these, but in light of his confusion and his desire to convince himself that the matter was normal, he looked towards the specter and said, "Fuck you, it's not, I have time for this crap." Then he quickly turned around and felt a quick cold air behind him. He was overcome by tension and began to sweat, but he quickly climbed the stairs and closed the cellar door with a quick movement after turning off the light. Then he walked towards the front door of the house. But the last light button that he had to turn off was in the opposite direction of the front door. He went towards it and pressed it, and as soon as the house became dark, he strongly felt something physical behind his back and a slight shiver running through his body. He did not dare to turn around and stood still in place, but fortunately, the street light was seeping into the house and illuminating the living room. He moved steadily towards the front door and left quietly. Then he closed the door and walked towards the front gate. He went out and pulled her behind him, smiling forcedly and angry with himself because of his unnecessary fear. He walked towards the truck, where his friends were waiting for him, and put the equipment he had brought in the cargo hold. Then he got into the driver's seat and started the car, but he was surprised by one of his friends asking him in amazement, "Wait a minute, what about your brother? Shouldn't we wait for him?" He replied, "My brother? What do you mean? He went to work early at night. Did you see his car nearby?" His friend looked at him in amazement, and the next question was extremely shocking, "So who was walking behind you when you were leaving the house?" The third story is the ghost car. On December 11, 2002, two people called the police and reported seeing a car swerving through traffic at night in the English city of Bortham. After the police searched the place, a car was found hidden among the trees. Its driver had died a long time ago. After investigations, the shocking truth became clear: this accident occurred 5 months ago when the deceased driver was reported missing by his brother. The last story is Psycho in the Room. There were 3 teenagers who loved watching horror movies and would always meet at the end of the evening to watch them. One day, one of these boys received a mail package from an unknown source. He had no idea who sent it. Inside he found a DVD that did not contain any message or information. He thought his friends were joking with him, so he went to his 2 friends to ask them about the matter. They denied having any involvement in the matter. Then the 3 of them entered the living room to watch the contents of the disc. A strange person who looked very much like a clown appeared on the screen, standing in the middle of a bedroom, with a closet to his right and a bed to his left, holding 2 red balloons and looking at the camera. Suddenly they heard strange music and the clown began to dance and jump like a madman. He was smiling with all his cheeks and had a threatening and strange expression on his face that spread terror in the hearts of whoever watched it, and his behavior was also strange. 2 of the friends started laughing loudly as they looked at the strange clown dancing like a madman, but they noticed that their third friend was very silent and calm. His face was very white and his eyes were open in horror. "What is the matter?" one of them asked him, giggling. "Why don't you laugh? Don't you see what we see?" The boy answered him in a cold voice, his eyes still staring at the screen in shock, "This is my room." We have reached the end of these stories. As I mentioned, some of them are confirmed to be true and some are not. As for the last story, it is an addition from me and is my own writing. The common denominator between all these stories is that nothing prevents them from happening to any of us. You, the reader, were watching. You may encounter it at any moment for the sake of entertainment and imagination. Those whose experiences you have been following are nothing but people whose luck has led them to live the nightmares of others in reality and have survived them, and nothing prevents you from being one of them one day. But I wonder what type you will be. Will you be one of the few survivors and return to narrate your experience, or will this be your last dream?